be honest, it takes a lot to be fired. No one hires someone with the intention of firing them. It's time-consuming and expensive, and in 2023, Forbes estimated that it can cost upwards of 33% of someone's salary to replace them. There are lots of different reasons why people can be fired, but there are 7 top behaviors that will definitely get you fired that you need to know about now. We're going to cover these behaviors in detail and how to avoid them and protect yourself in future. If you don't already know, my name is Lisa. I'm an HR director with a Master's of Information and over 25 years of experience working in human resources. I'm the author of the book, Think Like a Recruiter, Get That Job. The truth is that as an HR professional, I can't promise you that you're never going to be fired. There's no 100% safety for anyone at any level. What I can promise is that if you do any of these 7 top behaviors listed below, you're going to likely be fired. The first one is performance, not doing your job. Number 2, lying, time theft. Number 3, stealing or damaging company property. Number 4, attendance issues. Number 5, bullying and harassment. Number 6, substance use. And number 7, inappropriate behavior that violates a company policy, something like a computer use policy. Let's talk about them in detail now. Poor performance. Not performing your task properly or just refusing to do your job as requested will get you fired. Assuming there are no other issues, like for example health issues and the person's capable of doing the job, you could be fired. Most companies have a probation period, which is a set period of time that they've told you that they could terminate you at any time during that period. Don't be fooled, you can be terminated after that time as well regardless. Next is lying. Honestly, you don't need a law firm, research study, or me to tell you this piece. If you get caught lying, you'll break the trust, and that's the whole purpose of the employment relationship. It's based on trust. If you're lying about yourself or your work or someone else at work, you're in jeopardy of being fired. In 2019, a high-level Australian executive lied to get her job. She was caught and sentenced to 25 months in jail for fraud. She falsified her resume. She acted as her own reference under false pretenses. She hired her brother, and she used a picture of the model Kate Upton on her LinkedIn picture. Next is stealing, damaging company property or loss. This is really a no-brainer. If your manager or HR gets a hint of you having stolen or damaged property unbeknownst to you, there'll be an internal investigation started. You normally will get a chance to speak to it, but there will be usually hard evidence supporting everything before they even meet with you. Like lying, you'll be fired and they might get the police. One common example is people in positions that have the ability to create invoices. One clerk in an art center in the southern United States worked in accounts receivable and stole well over $1 million over a 5-year period. They submitted invoices for work never done. In terms of property damage or loss, you could also lose your job, especially if the company can prove you had adequate training. In some severe cases, you could be sued by the company. In the next example, a sales representative in New South Wales was responsible for precious gems, including transporting them. The clerk left them in the car, and they were subsequently stolen. She had been trained not to leave them unattended, but she still did. And the company insurance policy did not cover the loss, as it excluded coverage if they were left unattended. The employer sued the employee and was successful. In another example of damaging company property, an employee in Queensland drove the company heavy vehicle while under the influence and crashed it. It was considered willful misconduct. The courts ruled that the insurance company could go after the employee for the loss. So you lose your job and possibly face financial ruin. Next is attendance. If you don't show up to work, they could say, "We're done." It does not matter if you have a legitimate reason. After a while, you could just frustrate the employment contract. This can be a complicated issue, and it's not really all that cut and dry. But the simple fact is that you have a contract with the employer, and that means they pay you, and your job is to show up and do your job. I've had a lot of excuses given to me over the years. I think my best absence excuse was, "My cat is sick and I have to stay home to care for him." No, it's not going to fly. So top 5 excuses for not reporting to work in my research were, number 1, had to attend the funeral of my cousin's friend's pet as a pallbearer. Number 2, got caught in a store blood pressure monitor and could not get out. Number 3, I accidentally got on a plane, so can't come to work. Number 4, someone glued the windows and doors shut, so I couldn't get to work. Number 5, the fortune teller told me to stay home or face a brain hemorrhage. Honestly, these give me a brain hemorrhage. Next, bullying and harassment. Bullying and harassment can mean many things, and most times they're defined in the company policy. There is usually legislation that governs this, as well as defining the behavior. According to the American Psychological Association, bullying is a form of aggressive behavior in which someone intentionally and repeatedly causes another person injury or discomfort. Bullying can take the form of physical contact, words, or more subtle actions. According to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, harassment is a form of discrimination and includes any unwanted physical or verbal behavior that offends or humiliates you. Most companies would investigate, which can be stressful, but you get a chance to speak to your action. If an employee is found to be acting like a bully or harassing another employee, they can be fired. The next is substance use. This means using a substance that can alter your ability to perform your job accurately or maybe safely, like alcohol or drugs. Depending on the job and the safety sensitivity, it could mean likely that you get fired. If you are a doctor, you're held to a higher standard than a floor sweeper. And in the end, it could mean you get fired if you use at work or before work. Some substances stay in your system for long periods of time, so even if you think you're okay, you might not be. And lastly, inappropriate behavior that violates a policy. Inappropriate behavior is a huge catch-all, and we've listed many earlier, but I'll give you some examples that would likely violate a policy, like using the work computer for extended periods of time to do personal business, social media sites, or using it to run your own business. There is normally a policy like a computer or technology use policy that limits how much you can use your business technology for non-business purposes. Insubordination, which means that you don't do what your manager is asking you to do. Depending on what is being asked, it could mean one strike and you're out. Now, how to protect yourself. To try to avoid being fired, do the opposite of all the things we just listed. I know it sounds simplified, but that's the truth. Remember what I've said before. We do not want to fire people. We have invested a lot of time and money in hiring people. If your performance is an issue, check out my video on performance appraisals and why it's important to have it in your file. To give you the short answer for this video, do a 180-degree change and list things you know you should have been doing and do them. Start talking to your manager to make sure they think you're doing your job well. Lying, stealing, or damaging company property. It might be too late to fix these mistakes if you already have done them, but you're still working for the company, I assume, and I suggest a clean slate with your manager. Tell them how sorry you are and show them in your behavior that you can be trusted again. According to Van Hallo and colleagues in their research paper on employee trust repair, early intervention is key for individual trust issues. Start with a heartfelt apology. Better to do this in person and immediately act to improve actions at work. Finally, it takes time to improve relationships if the manager is willing to work towards rebuilding the relationship. Plus, it depends on how impactful the lie or damage was to the organization. So there are lots of variables, but starting with an apology and a plan to improve is a great starting point. Fix your attendance immediately if attendance is the issue. Stop missing work or being late is the obvious answer here so you don't get fired. Why are you late all the time? Only you can answer the question. If you have an underlying medical condition which is preventing you from coming to work regularly, have you talked to HR? The company has an obligation to investigate and, depending where you live, accommodate you at work. You have an obligation to improve your attendance and work with the employer. What can you do to help yourself to go to work? Bullying and harassment claims. Again, you have to start with the company policy and review it. You'd be surprised at what constitutes harassment at work. For example, it might include things that are not protected grounds under legislation. So in other words, it might be broad and cover more things like personal harassment. An example of that could be you're continuously using profanity at work and someone gets offended. I know you're thinking that makes no sense, but I'm serious. Check out the policy and do not violate it. Do not gossip at work. That can be a form of bullying, and if it's investigated, you can be in hot water for potentially creating a toxic work environment. Another example is having a work party but excluding people. It's a bad idea. Dating someone at work and then it turns ugly, but you're stuck there. Really, enough said, but many an investigation is done after that catastrophe. Keep it simple at work. Treat people with respect and know the policy, and you likely will be on the right track. In terms of substance use, you not only have to be careful about using it at work, but outside of work. According to the American Addiction Center, alcohol can stay in your system up to 72 hours and in your hair 90 days, and drugs could be in your system several days to weeks. Depending on the laws where you live, they could request a test if you are in a safety-sensitive job. So be careful if you were drinking and partying the night before and intend to go into work. I watched one video where a teacher was given a DUI at work and they had wine the night before. Think about it. If you have an addiction, it will work the same way with HR depending on where you live, as an addiction is considered an underlying medical condition. The employer normally has to attempt to accommodate you, but you'd have responsibilities as well, including stopping all substance use immediately and seeking treatment. If you kept falling off the wagon, there would not be much anyone could do to keep you employed. So if you have a problem, seek treatment now before it becomes a problem at work. Lastly, in regards to inappropriate behavior that violates a policy, you need to know your policies at work. They can make or break you. Some of it is common sense. The workplace owns the technology and they can track what you do. Expect no privacy with any technology at work, and they normally warn you in the policy if you read it. Think before you act. If I do this, will it be considered a reasonable behavior or action? Posting terrible things about your company on social media where everyone can see, is that a good idea or is that a bad idea? Common sense says bad idea under the Code of Conduct policy. There is hope in sight though. According to Forbes, in 2023, only 1% of the U.S. turnover rate at organizations was related to layoffs or firing, so it might not be as likely as you might think to get fired. But how do you protect yourself in future if you are fired? Sometimes you can't do anything to protect yourself. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I wanted to warn you that sometimes it doesn't matter what you do, you could face termination without cause. So without cause means that your company terminates you without a reason. So they'll pay you what you are entitled to under the legislation where you live. Where I live, it's the Employment Standards Act legislation that guides hiring, maintaining certain standards for employees, and termination. Sometimes it is a business decision to save money or change directions, and it might have absolutely nothing to do with you. So there are things you need to prepare even if you think you are the perfect employee. An emergency fund. Make sure you have an emergency fund to supplement between jobs. You may or may not be entitled to employment funds. McKnight and his colleagues studied the financial resilience of 22 different countries and their households. The most concerning finding was that 15 out of 22 countries, fewer than half of all households, held sufficient savings to cover the value of 3 months' income, and many were already in debt with no savings. So the first thing you can do to protect you and your family is to have an emergency fund. And the second is to get out of consumer debt. In my research, the general advice is having between 3 to 6 months emergency fund. Obviously, the more you have, the better prepared you'll be. That might sound daunting, but not having enough money to feed your family or you is pretty daunting. The next thing is references. You need to be working on this regularly to ensure you have someone in the company that will be a reference or a former boss. It may be your current boss if you leave on good terms. If you're getting a package, make it part of the settlement that your manager will give you a written reference. Some people say it's not worth the paper it's written on, but I disagree. If someone puts in writing, you did a good job, they will back that up if contacted. Make sure you keep a connection with your network now so you're not thrown off guard if you do get fired. The next thing is resiliency. It is important to build resilience so that you can make the shift to immediately begin looking for work. Resilience is defined as the ability to overcome adversity and adapt to change. If you're not born resilient, as it appears that a lot comes out of our genetics, you can learn those skills. Cohen and colleagues studied Happiness Unpacked and found it was resilience that did it. According to them, in their research, having positive emotions will allow you to build ego resilience, which in turn allows you to be more resilient when you're faced with negative experiences. So the more positive your outlook is, the better your ego resilience, which acts like a spiral building upon itself. So think positively about your skills, knowledge, and ability. Possibly analyze what you could have done differently. And if that was the case, learn from it and resolve to move on. Even if it is personal, it's like relationships. It might not work with one, but it works great with another. In Shropshire and Associates white paper, the more resilience you have determines whether you fight the fear to get reemployed faster. With less resilience, you face paralysis, which will reduce your chances of being reemployed. So you need to practice building the skill of resilience. As the old saying goes, get back up on the horse right away. Now the firing question. Be ready to answer why you left your last job if you are fired. Be honest, but it'll depend on the circumstances as to what you say at the time. The focus is that you were a good employee and there were other circumstances at play here. Be honest, don't lie, do not say negative things about the workplace or manager as it just makes you look bad. Talk about what you learned from the experience. Remember, the new place is looking to see if you'll work well with others, including the new manager. It could be that the company was downsizing if several people were let go at the same time. It could be that there were no opportunities for advancement, so you decided to leave. It could be for family reasons if that is the case. As I said, just because you were let go from one place does not mean you won't be a fantastic hire for the new place. You know, sometimes it could be a blessing in disguise. I fired some people and worked with others that were fired, and many of those people did better because they were fired. I honestly always say, you never know. It could be one of the best things that ever happens to some people. I've seen people at senior levels that have made a living just getting severances from different workplaces along the way. I don't recommend this, but I have seen it. But I've seen people stay for years after being fired from one place and coming to another place. I do think it comes down to how you handle the disappointment. So back to resiliency. You got this and you can make it better than it was before. Remember that. Your key takeaways today is to apply the tips I've provided today to avoid these 7 behaviors that get people fired so that you can make better decisions for your future. Since you can't control sometimes, if you will be fired, start preparing the safety measures we talked about. If you are fired, it's not the end of the world, and get prepared to move forward quickly to get your next job. If you're interested, check out my video on performance appraisals and how it can keep you safe from firing and make you money.